Hello, beautiful people. I hope that wherever you are in the world, that you are doing well and that you are taking care of yourselves. I'm Chris Danker, and this is Let the Adventure Begin. Let the Adventure Begin with Chris Danker podcast. Hey, we all know that change is always around the corner, but I think a story that I heard recently from my calm meditation describes this perfectly. And it was a story called Maybe. So once upon a time, there was this farmer and his horse ran away. And his neighbors go, "Oh, what poor fortune. That is horrible." And the farmer goes, "Maybe." And then the next day, the horse came back, and with it was 3 wild horses, to which his neighbors exclaimed, "Whoa, what good fortune you have." And the farmer goes, "Maybe." And then the day after that, his son tried to ride one of the wild horses, got bucked off, and broke his leg. To which his neighbors replied, "Oh man, what poor fortune." To which the farmer said, "Maybe." And then shortly after that, the military came through their tiny little village to draft able-bodied men, young men, who could serve in their army. And because the son had broken his leg and walked with a limp, they passed him by. To which his neighbors replied, "Wow, what good fortune you have." And as predicted, the farmer said, "Maybe." So as we see illustrated in this story, change is a constant. When something isn't going well, it won't always be that way. And when something is going well, it won't always be that way. So I want to talk today a little bit about how we can respond to change, because as I said, change is a constant. It is always going to be around the corner. And so the first thing that we need to do or can do is to understand the different responses that we can have. We can be excited, but we can also be nervous because of the unknowns. So think about, if you have ever moved or had job advancement, that maybe you were very excited about those things, but there were so many unknowns that made you nervous that, we can, have that excitement, but also have that kind of nervous energy. Likewise, we can respond to change when we're sad, and we can be sad about it. That can happen if it's the end of something, like the end of a relationship, or grieving over someone's death, or maybe transitioning from being fully employed to being retired. And sometimes there is a sadness to that. And so sometimes we don't want to acknowledge and feel the emotions. But it's really important to actually go through them instead of ignoring them or just trying to sweep it under the rug. So when we are, thinking about change, we need to fully let ourselves respond to that change. And sometimes, I am, and I've talked about this many times before on the podcast, that I am such a advocate for journaling. So, writing about it, journaling about it, writing down, if you're a person who's a list person, writing down the pros and cons about the change. What are the good things about it? What are maybe the negative things about it, or those cons? And if you're a list person, make that chart, make that pros and cons list and see, and that can kind of help you navigate the feelings that you might be having. Or if you are a person who likes to journal, use that as your prompt. What are the pros and cons about this change that I'm currently experiencing? And just let those thoughts just flow freely. And then sometimes, even, using that list or your thoughts that you write down from a journal prompt can help you better have conversations with trusted loved ones or a therapist when you are navigating, the change that is happening in your life. Second thing that we can do is to maintain a balanced perspective. So if you go back to the story about the farmer, his even-keeled response to each situation, whether it was thought of by his neighbors as bad fortune or good fortune, his response was maybe. He understood that change is inevitable and things are not going to stay the same. So when you're kind of feeling it this way, it helps to, when you're navigating through a change, to, like I said, if you do a pros and cons list, to go back through that and understand that, those great things, well, they're not always going to stay great. There's still going to be challenges. There's going to be change along the way. And likewise, if you're having something negative going on, having that balanced perspective of knowing that it's not always going to be that way. You can also find a change affirmation that might help you through the phase of the change that you are experiencing. Alan Watts, who is a British and American writer, had a quote that I really liked. So if you're trying to figure out, okay, what might I look up? I just did a Google search for quotes about change. And I really like this one that Alan Watts said. He said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." And I really like that because you're embracing it. You're embracing what it is, moving along with it, and then, and joining in that dance and understanding the ebbs and flows of that change. The third way that we can deal with change is to cultivate a positive attitude. And that doesn't mean we have to be all woo-woo about it because, if you're going through a sad or a devastating change, you're not necessarily going to feel very positive about it. However, it's important to remain open-minded. It's important to remain hopeful. Again, be aware of your thinking patterns in different situations when you experience change. Be productive. It helps to keep you from dwelling in, the sad or the negative feelings that you might be experiencing at that moment. So I wanted to talk about change mostly because of the fact when I listened to the guided meditation on the Calm app about the farmer and his even-keeled response to what was happening in the different situations, it was too important not to share because, as I said, and as we all know, change is inevitable. Nothing is ever going to stay the same. And as Alan Watts said, we have the opportunity to plunge into the change, move with it, and join the dance. So that's all I have for you this week. I hope that you have a great week. And until next week, I hope you let your adventure begin. Peace.